represented the state of Virginia in the Senate since 2009. He's currently the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee and a former governor of Virginia. Senator Warner, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Jessica, thank you so much for having me.
It's great. I was just talking to you. Scott is on a very long vacation, which he earned it, but he was talking about how much he admires you and talking about visiting with you years ago and how much he enjoyed that and that you invited him to come talk about big tech, and he was just totally bowled over by you. He also called you very tall and very handsome and said you should run for president. So I don't know if that means anything to you.
I am not doing that. I am like, maybe I got one more of these in me. I'm going to probably run for re-election next year, but, I don't want to be one of those that stays too long in this job.
Okay. Well, we'll get to the staying too long problem, but I want to start with the Epstein files, because who doesn't want to talk about the Epstein files? You have been right out in front on the Democratic side and talking about this, making some very effective social media videos. And I've noticed a change in your approach to social media, which I would love to discuss as well. But can you kind of take us through where things stand in terms of the release of the files and what your read is on the Ghislaine Maxwell element, which seems to have taken on new prominence this week?
Yeah, a great question. I mean, on the Epstein files, remember, this all came about because Epstein was clearly a bad guy. But the kind of politicization of this started because, President Trump in his campaign said, of course, he's going to get all this out. And then the MAGA movement obviously embraced this. And I think we all got teased by Attorney General Bondi when she said, hey, I got the files right here on my desk. And then all of a sudden, voila, there's nothing there to see, they said. And it just kind of begs the question about transparency. If the president says this is important and needs to get out, now the fact that he seems to have flipped, I think it undermines people's trust in the president. It makes conspiracy folks say, well, gosh, there must be something here. And then what's driven me crazy has been Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, who was clearly maybe on the way out a few weeks ago in terms of Trump was really displeased with her and she's politicized intelligence. She is doing everything possible to try to throw up distractions to try to get people to move off this topic, trying to relitigate, Russia intervention in the 2016 election, which, by the way, the Senate Intelligence Committee, every member, including Marco Rubio, came to the conclusion Russia did not manipulate the vote, but they sure as heck tried to have an influence campaign that favored Trump over Clinton. That was well known, and now trying to relitigate that, it has just, in calling Obama treasonous, it's so far over the line, but all in an effort to distract. And clearly it is not distracted because, the House was so freaked out about this that they sent their members home early rather than have a vote on trying to release these files.
Do you think that it's going to have a substantive impact, though? It's a juicy story, right, on a multitude of levels. It is bothering Trump. It is bothering his base. But does it become an election issue for the midterms?
I don't know. I mean, seems like nothing has that long of legs in today's news cycles. But this one kind of goes to the heart. If Donald Trump was going to come in and break the power and go against the elites, it just seems like people were kind of fascinated by Epstein because it seems like there were lots of elites in his orbit. And if suddenly one of the basic promises from Trump were, we're going to expose all this and the swamp and everything else, well, if he's not willing to expose all this, and it does seem, and I don't know what mention, if any, there was of Trump in these files, but clearly it seems like, and this question too, is it appropriate for Bondi to give him a heads up that he may be mentioned? And then all of a sudden this reversal kind of, I think, begs an answer. I don't think, interesting enough, I bet it will be the MAGA base that won't let this issue go. So at some point, this is going to have to come out. And I even read in one of the little cheat sheets this morning that there is now the video that actually includes the so-called missing minute. I never kind of understood how that took place in the first. Did you know how did they have this video of the cell that had a minute gone?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot about that, it's routine, and before the clock strikes the next hour, these things happen. But then it shifted to, it was more than a minute, it was moving to 2 minutes. And then you think also, I'm not a conspiracy theorist about this. I think Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. But for somebody that was so high profile and watched so closely, how was he able to? Because they can keep people alive in prison. They do it with a lot of
great
folks.
Question. It's a great question.
Yeah. Are you supportive of Senator Durbin's call to get the Ghislaine Maxwell interview tapes released?
Yeah, yes. I guess it seemed clear that Maxwell was Epstein's accomplice and groomer and well, Lord knows what else in terms of getting young women into his orbit. Um, I think it was interesting. The speaker even said he thought the 20-year sentence
Was
might have been
light.
too light. So the idea that suddenly you've got the number 2 or number 3 person in the Justice Department having an interview with an incarcerated person, and it clear that Maxwell's looking for a pardon, it just kind of stinks in terms of any kind of fair, open process. And I think Durbin's right. If there's, particularly if this ends up resulting in a pardon, I'd like to know what was promised. And it's not like Maxwell has a lot of credibility. That I think she's clearly willing to do anything to you know get herself out of prison. And I don't often agree with Mike Johnson, the speaker, but what she did seems pretty damn nefarious and pretty awful. And uh, it would be pretty disgusting if somehow at the end of the day she's set free because she's trying to either cover up or change her story to kind of appease the Justice Department. Just doesn't seem right.
There are victims who have actually said that they think that Ghislaine Maxwell was worse than Jeffrey Epstein in terms of her role in this. So, Mike Johnson, I was glad to hear him tell Kristen Welker, I think it was, that he thought it should have been a life sentence. But Speaker Johnson has said a lot of things, and then he just does what Trump wants. So I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, let's not hold our breath. Everybody who's viewing this, please do not presume that Speaker Johnson's position is going to be that Maxwell is a bad person, regardless of what happens. So
she could go the Greg Kelly route, right? That Maxwell is the victim in all of this. You brought up Tulsi Gabbard, our DNI now. You have been outspoken about her and the threat that she poses since the confirmation hearings, the rehashing the 2016 Intel issue. It didn't surprise me necessarily, but I was a bit exasperated. I said, how are we possibly talking about Hillary Clinton's emails again and relitigating this when it's in black and white, and that you're putting out newly declassified information that was from before there was even an investigation, right? Like that's what she just did. She said, okay, these are the initial assessments, and then ignored the fact that people spent years looking into this to come to their conclusions. You feel like Tulsi is on more solid footing at this moment with the president, though?
I don't have the foggiest idea, the inner workings of Donald Trump. But what made me so, beyond frustrated, just frankly angry and pissed off, was the document that she released was so sensitive about what's called sources and methods. That's spy talk for how do we spy on people and who's working for us, who's not, what's our tools. But this document was so sensitive that when in the first Trump administration, near the end, there was an effort to release it. All of the Trump intelligence officials, virtually everyone, said, you release this, we're going to quit because people aren't going to work with us anymore if we release this kind of information. She released this document on Friday without redactions. CIA was trying to redact to protect sources and methods. And it just reflects this disdain for the intelligence community. I mean, there is a chance that people will die because that document was released. This is one more piece of evidence, after the kind of complete cluster around Signalgate and classified information now being put on unsecure channel. Bring that on top of the fact where Gabbard literally fired intelligence professionals because they wouldn't change their conclusions about this investigation into Venezuelan gang. The gang was really bad guys, Trendalagua. They are bad people. The Maduro government, bad guys. But the administration wanted to claim that they were totally interconnected. The intel said both bad guys, or both bad entities, but they're not totally connected. People got fired. I had Five Eye partners saying to me, what the hell's going on? You got to have independence of the intelligence community. And they got to speak truth to power. And she constantly rebuts that. And then what makes me particularly kind of disgusted is she goes on all of these very political broadcasts. No director of national intelligence John Radcliffe didn't, Avril Haines didn't. And then she goes on these broadcasts and then basically trashes the workforce. Over the last dozen years, I've gotten to really respect the men and women who work in our intelligence workforce. They are non-political. They are patriots. They never get the recognition that you get in the armed services. And it's so debilitating. And we hear every day from people in the community saying, gosh, should we even keep doing these jobs?
Yeah, I wonder about that because the jobs that they haven't managed to eliminate yet, you hope that folks that can serve under Republican and Democratic
Right.
administrations are going to stick with it. But when you see some of these firings and when you see some of these behaviors, it does make you think that people might start to consider another route in life, or that they might be able to actually have more impact outside of the government.
Yeah. And think, Jessica, if you were like, it costs us about $250,000 to do a security clearance and put a CIA agent through training. And if we're starting to fire, they've said they've not fired anybody at the agency. They fired some around DEI, but they said that roughly 500 people have quit. They want to try to get that number to 1,200. How they picked that number was purely arbitrary, it appears to me. And I worry about losing experienced people, but I also worry about who's that young person who goes to one of our best schools and wants to work at the CIA or the NSA, where it's going to take a year and a half to get through the training process. Are they really going to do that with the intelligence committee under such assault? I just worry it's not only a current problem, but it's a problem in terms of the talent pipeline going forward. And that just makes us less safe as a nation.
One other thing that I think makes us less safe, and we had Congressman Himes on the podcast, and we're talking to him right around the time of Project Midnight Hammer, I think it was called. And we were talking about the breakdown in intelligence sharing in a bipartisan way. That typically speaking, someone in your position and someone in his position on the intel committees would have been briefed on such an operation in advance. Can you talk a little bit about that breakdown and how you see Midnight Hammer now in retrospect, looking at it from the Iranian strike?
The Iranian bombing. I think there was a clear process foul. I never had an apology or an explanation. Himes and I didn't even get notified. The Republicans did. That's just, the Trump first administration would never have done that. They don't have to seek our approval. They just kind of let us know. And we're in the so-called Gang of Eight. So I think there was a process foul. I think there was clearly our intelligence community had not reached the conclusion that Iran was moving towards weaponization. They were, again, bad regime. They'd done bad things, but I don't think the Ayatollah had given them a full green light. Once the bombing took place, and the bombing was successful, but he set such a high bar before any of the information was in, saying total obliteration. And then you've got the whole community and leaders like Gabbard and others trying to twist themselves into pretzels to try to reach this standard that was just too tough to reach. And nobody in the military ever thought these strikes were going to lead to total obliteration. But we have set back the program. That is clear. And if at the end of the day, Iran doesn't move any further down the path towards a bomb, if they don't retaliate any further, then it's a success. I just feel like at times Trump tries to make everything the absolute, the biggest, the bestest. This was a successful attack. We could litigate, whether it was 4 months or 2 years or whatever between. It set the Iranians back. If we would just do that and make that clear, it can take even successes and sometimes turn them into less than a success by claiming, like he always says, the fish is there. I guess unless people are watching, the fish is 6 feet long, as opposed this a fish that's 2 feet long is still a pretty big size fish.
When it's Iranian enrichment facilities, yes, a 2-foot fish is not so bad.
And not so bad, and the military did a great job. I'm not going to continue to criticize, particularly if the status quo in terms of Iran not striking back. But they still have plenty of cyber capabilities. And it again begs a little bit of the question of, oh my gosh, we got to get to a ceasefire in Gaza, because that would open up so many opportunities for realignment of Saudi Arabia and further realignment of UAE. And we could push Iran even further out of the mainstream if we could have this realignment.
Do you think we can have this realignment? It feels like there has been a sea change in how folks especially on the pro-Israel side, which Scott and I have been consistently, our feeling about what's going on. It seems like the uniform opinion now that the Gazans are being starved and that Bibi is not doing his best to ensure that humanitarian aid gets through. Trump, it was reportedly lost his temper with Bibi, especially angry about the strike on Damascus about a week and a half ago. There has been no legitimate rationale, actually, for why he was doing that. Can you talk a bit about where you think we are in terms of the ceasefire?
Yeah, I am, like you and Scott, I have been absolutely pro-Israel because you know, the awfulness of what happened October 7th, the need to return the hostages, the fact that Israel, has in the past at least tried to reach for peace. But I agree with you that I've been very close, particularly in the negotiations when Bill Burns was head of the CIA. And depending on which time it broke down, there were a number of times I think the Israelis could have gotten to a deal. I think Bibi insults the intelligence of frankly, of the whole world when he tries to pretend there's not mass starvation going on in Gaza. The idea that there's any path forward where literally every Hamas fighter will be totally taken out. No one in the intelligence or in the military, or for that matter, in terms of private conversations with the Israeli intelligence. It's an unreachable goal, and unfortunately, it appears more and more to the outside that Bibi's more concerned about his own personal political future and the charges that he faces inside Israel than he is about actually taking this moment in time where Israel has never been stronger and frankly solidifying that with a realignment of Saudi Arabia. Remember, Saudi Arabia is the keeper of the faith and the holiest sites for Muslims, and the possibility of bringing other countries into an Abraham-like accords, like Indonesia or Malaysia, elsewhere, boy, that is a once in a generation opportunity, but it's not going to happen as long as this conflict keeps going on in Gaza. And to your point quickly on the Syria piece, amen. I mean, again, I'll give Trump credit here. I mean, he's trying to take advantage of the government change in Syria. We, trust but verify, but the fact that the new leadership there seems to be moving in the right direction. And I give, again, Trump credit for trying to, at least promote that. And again, give Trump credit for much, and I will get grief for even saying that. But then the idea that you're going to somehow bomb the presidential palace, what for?
Well, self-preservation, which Trump also knows something about himself. But I do think it's important to give credit where credit is due. And this is a safe place for those kinds of conversations, because you seem totally out of touch if you can't even acknowledge something like what the Abraham Accords Part 1 was, or the prospect of Abraham Accords Part 2, and expand it in the way that you're discussing. And in a lot of ways, Bibi got Trump back to the Oval Office, and it looks like he is one of the biggest thorns in his side as he tries to navigate this very complicated issue. And as a Democrat, I was hoping that you could talk about the fissure within our party as it relates to Israel, because you have seen some of the staunchest defenders of Israel, like Richie Torres, for instance, really change the way that he's talking about the issue. And he feels that the break within the Democratic Party on this issue is irreparable. That's the term that he used.
I hope it's not irreparable. And again, I'm of the age where I grew up with Moshe Dayan and Golda Meir and Abba Eban, and a host of Israeli leaders that celebrated democracy, celebrated an Israel that was multi-faith. There was still a homeland for the Jews, but had a Christian community, had Arab citizens. And I just fear is that I think about young people in this country. They've only grown up with an Israel that has been, for the most part, for the last 20 plus years, governed by Bibi Netanyahu. And it is not the underdog, but is far and away the most powerful nation in the region. And I celebrate that again. I mean, what Israel has done in technology is remarkable. And I just hope and pray it is not irreparable, because what I have seen, and I've seen this, as pro-Palestinian protesters have protested at my home, and it goes beyond Palestinian. It does bleed at times into anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And I just feel like the scourge of anti-Semitism cannot be allowed to. I just have so many friends who've even started saying, Mark, I'm not sure, that my grandkids are going to be able to stay in America. And that, we have to stand up against that. We also have to stand up against Islamophobia as well. I fear some of those kind of respect for our differences is fraying in this political system. And time and again, Trump never misses an opportunity to try to divide us further on whatever basis. I don't think there may be a unifying bone in his approach on any policy, and that scares the hell out of me on a going forward basis in our country.
To immigration, which is obviously a hot button issue. One of the main reasons the Democrats lost the presidential election in November, the Laken Riley Act, you voted for it and have recently expressed some remorse that you made that decision. Could you talk a bit about your vote and how you're feeling now?
It was a very tough vote. And, elections have consequences. And my feeling was that clearly the American people, I think across party lines, felt like undocumented people here that had committed crimes should not be here. And that was hard to rebut. But I think you can be for border security and not be for the kind of actions that ICE has unleashed on populations around our country. I mean, the idea that we are somehow saying that ICE, which by the way, now with all the plus ups, has a bigger budget than the FBI. ICE now has a bigger budget than virtually every
than the
military.
IDF, actually.
Than the IDF, and has a bigger budget than militaries in all but the 15 largest nations. And the idea that we are saying, ICE, you don't have to adhere to the same standards that Virginia state troopers or a local police department has, where you're supposed to identify yourself. And obviously, if you show up at somebody's door, you're going to show your face so you don't. You can be clearly identified as law enforcement. And I think the American public has said, yeah, we want to be for border security, but we don't think moms ought to be picked up while they drop their kids off at daycare, or that somebody ought to be picked up going to work. Some estimates of upwards of 60% of the people being picked up and then potentially deported have no criminal even charge against them. So I am trying to stand up, work, for example, with the Latino faith community. We're trying to get literally packets for every church. Here's what happened if they come to try to invade your sanctuary, who do you call, what do you do, here are your rights. How do we connect other faith traditions so that people can reinforce each other? Because the fear level across all immigrant communities, but particularly across the Latino community, it's un-American at this point, that fear level. And I hear from law enforcement all the time. We've worked for years to try to build trust in the community. And now people are afraid to report crime to the police. This is not who we are as a country. And I think that is why I can't think of a single issue that has changed more than Americans' views on how we ought to enforce immigration laws. And there's a lot of things that I feel like I crash my head against the wall each day. This is one where I think the basic goodness of the American people are saying, hey, we're for secure borders, but we're not for this stuff. And so I've got legislation to try to say, hey, ICE ought to operate under the same rules that the state police and local cops do, and in terms of disclosing themselves and identifying themselves. And of course, if you're undercover or if you're trying to do a SWAT raid, there are exceptions for local police in that. I'm not sure ICE should be held to a different standard than Virginia state troopers.
Do you think that will pass?
And it'll be tough in today's environment, but I think it's so important to show that I'm listening to the communities that are under assault in Virginia and trying whatever way I can to push back and try to do it. The bill I'm putting forward, for example, also says that if you are harassed as an ICE agent, we will give you the tools to kind of allow you to remove your name. Kind of, if you are doxxed online, we're going to say, hey, that's a real possibility, and we want to give the resources. So I'm not trying to do just a messaging bill. I'm trying to say, all right, can I find some Republican partners? And I'm still talking with Republicans and talking, frankly, with a lot of law enforcement organizations that are saying, hey, this may at least be in the right direction of what we could live with. So my goal in this job, and I get grief sometimes from both sides, is how do you actually get shit done? And that requires, frankly, working with people on both teams and my view on bipartisanship is not that it makes any solution set intellectually better, but it does mean I've never seen a perfect bill. And if you have both parties working on it, then both parties have to own the good and the bad, because every bill, no matter how perfect, go back to Social Security, Medicare, you've got to always come back and fix it. And if you only have one team working on it, it's never going to get fixed in an appropriate way, because the other team will simply say, hey, we told you so. So I am still committed to the idea that things are better if they're done bipartisan. And I'm trying to work on that even in this space.
I admire it and hope that you have some success. It is a big uphill climb at this moment. What grade would you give the Democrats right now on getting shit done?
When you're in the minority, it's pretty damn hard. I think, what may be weird to look back is the one bipartisan bill that has passed, that the president has signed, has been around, stable coins. And I helped get 19 Democrats. And listen, there are a lot of questions about this, but I think crypto is not going away and we ought to have American rules. It was particularly hard to get 19 Democrats while the Trump family was self-enriching itself in this domain. That's on getting stuff done. I do think the Democrats, we stumbled at first, but I'm not, bummed out that we don't know who the leader in 28 is going to be yet. If we did, that would be the old Democrats that are kind of next in line. I think there's got to be healthy debate. And I think we have sharpened our message that this is not what people wanted from Donald Trump. They wanted lower prices. They're not going to get lower prices. They didn't want to throw 16 million Americans off of healthcare. They didn't want to cut food assistance. I think we have sharpened the message. And I think also, the main goal in 26 has got to be to win. But I also am very much of the mindset that I want to be part of a Democratic Party. And there needs to be this debate that is back to being pro-growth, pro-innovation, that recognizes that in our effort to protect people, we sometimes went too far on the regulatory side. I always point out I'm a big advocate for rural broadband. $42 billion in broadband money in the infrastructure bill. We didn't lay a mile of fiber because both Congress put too many burdens and then we just had too many regulations. Housing is an area that's driving me crazy. We need to clear away some of the regulatory hurdles. And that idea of a Democratic Party that's future focused, as opposed to the Democratic Party that now I think by many Americans is viewed as kind of the party of the status quo, is really, I'm looking forward to that debate and engaging in it. And I think it's really, really important. And Trump is doing, we know, huge damage to a whole host of fields and a whole series of government functions and cutting back. Democrats come back in. What I think we need to do is not simply say, all right, we're going to regrow these bureaucracies to where they were just because. No, we ought to use this as a chance to do a reset on how government performs. I'm a big advocate of pay for performance. I think on how we get people through the AI transformation. Well, on workforce training, we ought to not pay people for the government-based programs until you actually place somebody and they're in that job for 6 months. Pay for performance. Let's make sure that we actually make government services more consumer-friendly, customer-using. I mean, we're going to have an opportunity, frankly, because of some of the stupidity of the original Doge, although a smart Doge would have been brilliant, to kind of figure out what is the vision of how you want to build some of these things back. Simply building them back to where they were in 2024 is not what the American people, I think, are looking at.
The mission of Doge had one of the higher approval ratings that I've ever seen. The execution was terrible. But if we could do a 1990s redux and go about it the way that the Clinton administration did, I think a lot of people would be happy. And even just the way that you're talking about this, you're someone who came from the private sector and was quite successful, not talking like a politician all the time is good for people. And they like that about Donald Trump, that he...
Amen. And it's we got named best managed state when I was governor. And I kept using the example, I lowered the cost of light bulbs from 32 cents to 23 cents. But we buy a ton of light bulbs as the state of Virginia. That kind of practical, how do you save money or how do you improve? If you think about taxpayers as customers, the customer experience is what sets a successful organization away. And that has been so missing on how government even thinks about delivering services for so long. And as we think about, because the other thing that I'm obsessed about is AI transformation and what it's going to do. There's great upside, but boy, oh boy, I think we're already seeing huge dislocation. If I had one group that I have huge empathy for. It's current college students, recent graduates, or folks about to go to college. They've had to live through COVID and that whole disruption. They've lived through a political dysfunction from both parties. And now they're coming out after their parents told them, you get that college education, and all of those good college starting jobs, even if the investment banks and you are being just eliminated. You can't say stop, but you can say, oh my gosh, they're being eliminated because AI can provide those functions. And I think we are about to see a tsunami through the workforce and really thinking how we think about that in a kind of all of society way. And even to the question of, I think there should be some responsibility. And is it the company that uses AI? Is it the large language model that underlies it? Is it the NVIDIA, who's now the biggest, most profitable company in the world, or highest valuation? That the people who sell the bullets to make the machines? I don't know the answer yet. But I do think that kind of conversation and being honest with people about the kind of holy shit moment that's going to come in people's lives, and acknowledging, especially young people right now are going through a level of stress that I think is almost unimaginable, would be really important and positive for reestablishing that sense that in America you can do anything. I mean, we can't guarantee success, but everybody ought to get a fair shot in this country. And I worry that AI may be removing that fair shot opportunity for a lot of folks, a lot of young people who've done everything right, everything the parents told them to do.
Yeah, it's a tough landscape. I have a 3 and a 1-year-old, so I have a little while to fret about this, but it's definitely a concern. And that we first were talking about it only as a blue collar job issue, and now I feel like everyone is just focused on the white collar impact.
Well, Jessica, it's actually going to be the reverse. Frankly, the blue collar job, we all keep paying lip service to carpers and electricians, but it's always like politicians say that when they send their kids to an Ivy League school. But those jobs coming out of the Ivy League schools, those entry-level jobs, I know they are disappearing at a unrecognizable rate. And we're still in the, literally on this top of the first inning in AI. And boy, oh boy, we need better engagement there as well.
What's one issue that makes you rage, and one thing that you think we should all calm down about?
The thing I think on raging is housing. It's the average age of first-time home buyer, 38. And we got to do more housing supply. We just did pass a bill that starts taking on some of the regulatory burden. And literally, we got every Democrat, ranking member Elizabeth Warren was part of this group. So I think there is finally a consensus that you can't do such regulation that you completely shut off supply. And I think we need a host of new ideas around housing and supply of first-time home buyers. There's plenty of home buyers, but how you bring costs down. And I've got a bunch of ideas on that, even some of the ideas on how you get seniors. Maybe you could have mortgages that you would be able to pass on, because so many people are locked into low interest rate mortgage. So that's the one people ought to rage about more. And we've kicked the can on housing for a while. On the thing that I think people should chill out about, and this is kind of maybe just on a personal basis, we the other day when we did our third all-nighter on the big ugly bill.
Right.
And I would do because I'm trying to do better on social media, I would do my social media, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock. And I know I think the 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock one, I was having an Egg McMuffin, and I got so much grief. Warner, you should be eating healthier. You're being a role model. Well, I think people should chill out. If I'm done an all-nighter and I want to eat some comfort food or a Krispy Kreme donut or something, as long, for those of you who follow me, it's not a gross tuna melt, I think they should chill out about early morning eating habits after an all-nighter.
I totally agree. We can't all be maha all the time. And you deserved it. And I have appreciated your focus on social media, because I was tracking you from the car videos to where you are now with, I'm not saying you're Zoran Mamdani, but you're getting it done. And
well, it's also
we're happy to see it.
Well, and frankly, it's an education for me. I was a tech guy, but kind of fully grasping the fact that 65% of Americans don't read or watch any news.
Yeah.
You got to meet people where they are. You can't just bitch about it. You got to meet people where they are.
I love it. And I loved having you here. Thank you so much for your time, Senator Warner.
Jessica, thank you.
We did some analysis. We only have 38 advertisers. Prof G is probably at this point across all our podcasts, probably top line $20 million business. And it's only 38 advertisers, but it's pretty basic. The majority of the brands we recognize, and it's like if it's Range Rover or Saks or LinkedIn or Microsoft, yeah, we like those companies and they're credible. The immediate red flags or the no shoes, no service, you're out of here are one, crypto. Don't do crypto ads. And that's not because I don't think there are certain well-lit, bright corners at crypto that probably, I do think Bitcoin's a tangible asset class right now. But in general, I find that crypto, the majority, 99% of the tokens are shit coins and just speculation with no underlying cash flow or scarcity value. I think they prey on young men. And that is one of the things that I think would really benefit a lot of young men is if they got out of the house and started making their own money and connected sacrifice and discipline and showing up and showering and putting on a tie or putting on a uniform and showing up 10 minutes early, connected that to making money as opposed to seeing screenshots on Reddit of someone who made a bunch of money on ETH or CumRocket or some stupid fucking coin. I think in general, gambling may be the next opiate crisis. And these things are consumption. They're fun. If you're having a good time, fine. But what I hate about them is people under the impression they're investing. Investing is generally the assumption you're going to make more money and you're going to hold onto it for the long term, and you're helping finance a company that will grow in value, and you share in the cash flows of that company after it uses your capital to grow. That is not what crypto is. So we don't do crypto. We don't take gaming ads, which would be a substantial increase in our advertising revenues because these guys have a lot of money and are advertising freaking everywhere. If a financial services company pitches us, that's when we actually do some vetting. Like if Fidelity or Vanguard or Acorns, companies that I think are helping young people establish economic security, want to advertise, we love those firms. What I don't like is some of these quote unquote funds that take onerous fees and are basically just spinning investors. And they're going to do really well, but the investor, him or herself, is not going to do well. So we've turned away some of the sketchier or stranger investment products that we can't validate. That's generally our approach to it. What I do find is that if I talk about a brand a lot, they reach out because it's more fun to speak to something organically that you love. But the thing about host readovers is it's more authentic, and we get about $45 CPM. CPM cost per 1,000. Get 1,000 people listening to your podcast. An advertiser will pay $45 for an ad that reaches those 1,000 people. And it's because when you hear my voice, you're less likely to skip the ad and you're more likely to believe I like the product. And I do like the product. I've had an American Express card for 40 years. I've had a black card for 30 years because it makes me feel important. It's basically a platinum card sprayed black that I pay $5,000 a year. But I think it signals my worth as an investor and a mate. Isn't that pathetic? And it works. Anyways, Amex is a sponsor. It's pretty easy to make a judgment call. Most of our brands are big brands or tech brands and say yes. Occasionally something's weird. We do a little bit of diligence. I don't know if you have a marginal or moral obligation. Look, it's a capitalist society. If people want to spend money on your pod, fine, and it's legal. But I don't want to be seen as spending a ton of time talking about the struggles of young men and then endorsing products and mendacious fucks. Like I like public.com. They don't pay for order flow. I find them more responsible. And I think Robinhood are, what's the term? Mendacious fucks, basically spinning young men into trading every day. And 95% of day traders end up with less money. So I do have some like personal peccadillos or biases, but basically at the end of every show, we run through advertisers who have approached us, new advertisers, and we decide thumbs up, thumbs down. And I would say
worked consistently in Hollywood for the last 10 years. But this past year, many filming jobs in Los Angeles have begun to dry up, and she has found herself out of the job for the longest period of her career. The city and state are trying various incentives to get filming back, but after listening to your insights on the future of Hollywood, I've become more convinced that Hollywood will not return to the level of its former glory. I've been trying my best not to sound too alarmist about her industry, but I've also been hinting that she may need to consider a more steady work arrangement if these gaps become longer and longer. She loves the industry, and leaving it fills her with trepidation. As someone who has rebuilt himself more than once, I'm wondering what advice you have for someone that not only has to rebuild themselves, but also has to reinvent themselves and their career. What suggestions do you have for someone going through the biggest pivot of their life?
Oh, Justin, this is a tough one. And content production, the spending is actually level. It hasn't gone up. It's level globally. The problem is it's essentially flowing downwards from a big screen to a medium-sized screen and TV, but mostly to a mobile screen. So what I tell young people is the return on your investment, financial and human capital, is inversely correlated to the size of the screen. If you're in the business of trying to make content on a big screen, you're fucked. Her industry is in structural decline or malaise. And then to add insult to injury, Los Angeles is really struggling. And Los Angeles has been struggling for about a decade because the cost of production there is just more expensive and they don't have the tax credits. So I think that being in your industry in LA, like I'm outlining all the reasons why she's struggling, which doesn't help in terms of what to do next. So there's a couple things. Is there a geographic arbitrage? Would she be better being somewhere else if she's already ready to travel? I don't know if you have kids, but she might have to. I'm good friends with an actor who's killing it right now and has been in a bunch of the top movies. And he's in Budapest, and then he was in LA last week, and then he's doing all sorts of stuff all over the world, and he's geographically flexible. He just kind of goes where the work is or where the money is. The standard for what you do next is, one, you look at your skills and think, where would my skills be applicable somewhere else? If she's in charge of scout location, the people who come, I've had my place rented for movies a couple times and a team shows up and figures out if it's the right place. If you're in charge, if you're a line producer or the person who actually makes this shit happen. They filmed Westworld on my block in Soho, and I thought, whoever's organizing this would be a great event planner. Do you have organizational skills, ability to recognize talent, manage a bunch of vendors? Okay, have you considered saying to your next friend who has a wedding, I would like to plan your wedding. What are you doing? There's going to be more and more money in event planning. I just came up with this, and I really like this, because people are now recognizing that experiences matter more than things. Rich people have a lot of money, and when they throw their kids' bat mitzvah, they're not spending 20 grand, they're spending 80 grand. That's just an example. I'm not suggesting she should be an event planner, but sit down and write down what are the skills required to do what she does in Hollywood, and then just take the term Hollywood out and say, where might these skills also be applicable? Also, be open to asking for help, and that is reach out to a bunch of people in the industry, or better yet, people who were in the industry and made the successful transition out if she's looking to get out. The other thing is if she's decided, look, ride or die, I'm staying in LA for whatever reason, maybe you have a good job there, maybe her family's there. I would say that the best way to get a job is to be as social as possible, and that is to go out and be as social and meet people, tell them you're looking for work, be aggressive. I think a lot of times people in certain industries are used to people calling them and having a certain amount of demand. Get off your heels, onto your toes, be more social, be out, be networking. Think about where your skills might be applicable in other industries, and just take off all preconceived notions of what's prestige and what isn't. Just what would your skills lend themselves well into another industry? Be incredibly social and tell people you're looking for work. Also, don't be too hard on yourself. The worst thing that could happen is you get paralyzed and don't do anything and just kind of like mope around. And then, some basics. Every night, put together a list of the five things you're going to do every day. Success is a series of small acts of discipline done every day. But we all go through this. When I first moved to New York, I just had no fucking idea what to do with my life. I had thought I was going to be rich because my company had gone public, then it went out of business. And I'm like, oh, wait, I'm not rich. And so every day, though, I try to say, okay, I'm going to get out of the house. I'm going to meet people. I'm going to, try and make some progress. Don't be a snob. You're not above other industries or doing something else. And just be very aggressive and realize that this is an economy now that is for, in that industry, that is for hustlers and people out calling people and trying to get meetings. Sorry, I can't be more prescriptive and more helpful here. I think that's daily. Eat clean, and can comfortably pay for the rent of my Brooklyn apartment. That said, I'm struggling to build new relationships with people who really challenge and inspire me. I've tried volunteer groups, sports leagues, and creative communities here in New York City. These endeavors are all meaningful, but haven't led to those uniquely stimulating relationships. Any suggestions on how to expand your network of friends in an authentic, non-transactional way, especially in a city? So the first thought I had, the fact you're even thinking this way means you're going to be fine. It's the kid or the person who just always makes excuse, has an immediate autoimmune reaction to stay at home. I went out and met friends last night. This guy who's this magnificently successful guy and his lovely wife. And I have to force myself to do that because I'd rather just stay at home at this point in my life. I'd rather just sit around and wait for the ass cancer. Also, give some friendships a chance to marinate. Sometimes people might not feel that inspiring up front, but maybe they have a different friend network. What is the key to friendships? It's sort of ubiquity and getting out and being open. Also, I met this guy. I'm getting these PRP shots in my shoulders, and the orthopedic surgeon who's been doing it, I said to him, I said, hey, I actually asked him, I said, are you single? He's literally like this handsome doctor, right? I think he said yes. And I thought, oh my God, I know so many women that I would like to set you up with. Let's get together sometime and I'll, if you're up to it, I'd like to set you up, because I'm constantly hearing from women, do you know any guys? Or economically and emotionally viable guys, I should say. And he's reached out to me a couple of times and said, hey, do you want to go to a hockey game or something? And I so much respect that, because I think he's about 20 years younger than me. He's like this young doctor who's just killing it, and he wants to hang out. And when I was his age, I didn't have the confidence to just text people and say, let's hang out. A couple of times I've said to people, guys, after dinner, I'm like, I feel a really great vibe with you. I'd love to hang. Most men aren't comfortable saying that. And so I would be willing to express like, hey, let's get together. I do a lot of mandates. I go out with men a lot. And that is, I'll just say, hey, let's grab dinner and go out. But the fact you're getting out, the fact you're even thinking about this, I get the feeling you're just tracking. The fact that you don't find these relationships that inspiring or that interesting, what I would say is to anybody who meets somebody and there's not sparks right away, is like, give it a second coffee and never know how it might develop. The key to all of this is touching grass. What I mean by that, getting out of your house, getting in the presence of strangers, being open, being friendly. And at least twice a week, whether it's a church group, writing class, nonprofit, sports league, whatever it is, and just being very open to meeting people and follow up and express interest in friendship. But I don't know, boss. Rogan, I think your message would actually resonate a lot with him and his audience. What are your thoughts on Rogan? My first thought is that everybody in podcasting should probably send a royalty to Joe every time we do a podcast, because I do think he blew open the medium. So, and also he's enormously successful, good at what he does. He's sort of set a vibe for podcasts, and that is podcast culture, I think, is a little bit more gentle. And I try and practice this. And that is, I don't try to play gotcha with who are my guests. I try to present them in their best light. I'll occasionally push back, and it's a fine line, but I want to let people run and give them the benefit of the doubt, and then push back enough to challenge stuff that my listeners are probably asking. But I don't want to be a food fight. I don't want to be Abby Phillips or Fox and like trying to call people out for a TikTok moment. I don't do that. I'm not looking for sparks. And I think Joe kind of set the tone there. I think he's, generally speaking, he attempts to position people in their best light. I think it was a huge mistake for Vice President Harris not to get down there. She should have taken the bus down there if needed, and it would have saved her 3 weeks of going on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox for 3 hours. This is actually legitimate. It would have taken her, she would have had to go on those programs 3 hours a night on cable news for 2 weeks to match the exposure that Trump got on Rogan. Now, this is the problem, though. And this is, quote unquote, my issue with Rogan, is that he will bring on Sanjay Gupta to talk about the COVID vaccine, and then he'll bring on some fucking quack and create a false equivalence and create a scenario where people start questioning the legitimacy of whether or not, or the veracity of the statement that this quack, who's been debunked and basically had his licenses removed, of saying that mRNA vaccines alter your DNA. And I feel Spotify and Joe didn't match the size and influence of his platform to fact-checking. And the reason I have not gone on Rogan, nor will I go on Rogan, nor will I ever be invited on Rogan. Basically, everyone like me has been invited on Rogan. And the reason why I have not been invited on Rogan and will not accept an invitation, which is not coming, is during COVID, I pulled down all of my podcasts from Spotify. And the reason for doing that was I lost someone who I cared a great deal about to COVID. And they had decided, along with their girlfriend, that they were part of this anti-vax narrative. I think they were misinformed. I think they were influenced by media that was spreading misinformation. And I think the manosphere did an especially good job of hip checking or creating as false equivalents or not being very honest about what the science said. And also, we got it wrong. When I say we, America got it wrong. There was some narrative that was just false, or just it became that you couldn't trust institutions anymore. First saying that, no, you don't need masks. Oh, no, everyone has to mask. Oh, you won't get COVID with this vaccine. No, you would get it. You were just likely not going to die from it if you got it. Anyways, this person close to me was an anti-vaxxer, came down with COVID, series of really unfortunate circumstances. I don't know if it was poor health care, but this was someone who should not have died of COVID. Long story short, was on a ventilator, took him off the ventilator, thought he was getting better, crashed and died. And then approximately 7 months later, his girlfriend killed herself and left an orphan boy. And this has been obviously difficult for a lot of people. And I want to be clear, I don't hold any platform or any podcaster responsible for the death of an individual around COVID. But I do hold Spotify and Joe responsible for not, again, matching their fact-checking and their fidelity to the truth around really sensitive issues as their platform has grown. For me, it's very much a mixed bag. I don't think he's a malicious person. I think everybody on the medium owes him a great deal. But I do think Spotify and Joe were reckless with other people's health and created unwittingly greater death, disease, and disability than exciting. It was a lot of work, and it culminated in that, and that was very rewarding. I had never hit number one before. I've hit number 5, but I'd never hit number 1, so that was really exciting. The live tour for Pivot was really rewarding. We did 7 cities and 7 nights. Live podcast, who would have thunk it? I wouldn't have thought people would show up for a live podcast, but it was really nice to meet people and quote unquote engage with the fans. We hosted about 15,000 people across 7 venues. So those were sort of, I think, the professional highlights. We've hired some really good people. Our business is strong, so professionally things are going well. On the downside professionally, I didn't make that much money this year. I usually make a bunch of money from investments. And this year I invested in a Bitcoin treasury company, and most of my stocks have just been flat. So I think I got spoiled making a lot of money. And it feels like this year everyone's making money but me. So that's kind of disappointing. Although, why the fuck do I care? I have enough money. It hasn't changed my life, but still it weighs on me mentally when I'm not making good money. See above, addicted to money. So that's sort of, I guess, the net of my professional life. Personally, look, the worst thing that happened, my father passed away a few months ago. Not surprising. 95, lived a very robust, kind of the American dream. I had, like many people, a kind of a complicated relationship with my father, and him passing stirred a lot of those emotions, and I was just sad for him. But that was obviously, now, my only family really is my sister by my dad's 3rd marriage, other than my own kids. That was difficult, as it should be. The best thing, I'm trying to think, the highlight personally for the year was I did a college tour with my oldest, and it was just me and him. And over like 10 days, we went to 7 cool little towns ranging from Evanston and Madison to Chapel Hill and Charlottesville. It was just so nice. We'd check into these little weird hotels, grab dinner, and then do a school tour in the morning. And it was just really rewarding for me to spend that much time with him, and also very, what the term is, melancholy, or not sad, but this little kid who used to bomb into my room in the morning on the weekends and crawl in bed with me and then wake up and say, "Dad, let's make a plan," is now 6'1" and walking around, Northwestern's campus, asking questions about their biology department. It's both incredibly rewarding and quite frankly sad. And I like the notion that kind of grief and anxiety are the receipts for love, and I'm feeling some of that. But that was the best. I had a great summer. I lead a life of privilege. I did amazing things. I've gone amazing, places and stuff. Done. Oh, hey, Dan from Melbourne. I just decided I'm going to be the mayor of Melbourne, Australia. I think I could move. I think I'd be big in Melbourne. So look, it's easy to say that the team is everything, right? Team with best players wins. Greatness is in the agency of others. But then the question becomes, well, how do you find great people? And what I have found is you're constantly posting, telling people you're looking for people when you are looking for people. And my approach to hiring, and I'm not sure it's the right approach, but it's my approach and it's worked, is I tell people, everyone I know, do you know anyone smart, really good? And it doesn't matter if they're looking, but I'll say to people, especially we have a strong kind of referral system in our company, who are really smart people in your peer group, and let's bring them in and tell them about our company and see if they'd be interested in joining us. I do not really believe in the power of interviewing. I mean, the kind of bottom and top 10%, the tails of people in interviews, occasionally meet someone you're like, okay, this is obviously not a fit. And occasionally meet someone you think, Jesus Christ, this person is just so impressive. I'm pure about reference hiring. And that is, and I always tell the story, but Ed Elson, who's my co-host at Prop G Markets, or now that he's hosting 5 days away, I should say I'm his co-host. But essentially, this woman, Joanna Coles, called me and said, "You must hire Edward Elson." That's my woman's British impersonation. And I said, "Well, for what role?" And she said, "It doesn't matter, you idiot." She basically said, "You got to hire this guy." And if somebody I trust calls me and says, "You got to hire this person," I'll hire them. I find reference hiring is absolutely the way to go. But I'll make it clear to the person, all right, this isn't a friend or someone you want to do a solid for. This is someone you think, that if I hire pretty much sight unseen, they're going to work out. Now, everyone has to interview them. Everyone has to agree that they would like to work with them. But for the most part, if I get a really strong reference hire from someone who either works with us or someone I trust, that person has got kind of a 80, 90% lock on the job, because I find reference hires are absolutely the way to go. So what do? You spread the word that you're looking for people. You don't wait for people to call you. You find really good people, and then you ask to meet with them, and you just get on their radar. Hey, this is what we're up to. If you ever want to know more, we have a lot of respect for you. We've heard you're great. And also, when you do find good people, the only way to get them to act like owners is to make them owners. I usually give away equity, and then I will plot a path for them. I think young people want to come to work to learn and to develop economic security for them and their families. So the best reference hires for people looking to join, whether I should join this firm, is they'll talk to the people at the firm or the people who used to work there. And I'll sit down with an employee after they've worked out for a year, and I'll say, okay, this is the strategy for the company. This is our strategy for you. This is where you'll be in 3 years professionally, from a position standpoint, a responsibility standpoint, and also a financial standpoint. And just be very explicit. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But knowing that you demonstrate excellence and that you want them to win is very intoxicating for them. At Prof G Media, I think we have 25 or 30 people now. And I think we've had maybe 1 or 2 people leave voluntarily. That's all for this episode. If you'd like to submit a question, please email a voice recording to officehours@profgmedia.com. Again, that's officehours@profgmedia.com. Or if you prefer to ask on Reddit, just post your question on the Scott Galloway subreddit. And it's like, okay, boss, this, at the end of the day, a relationship is somewhat of a transaction. And so I think just giving young people more opportunity to both have jobs and contribute economically. And I just still think the dollar sign next to the dude is still unfairly a sign of his manhood. And I'm not sure that we're going to be able to starch that out in years or even decades. I think it's going to take hundreds of years. I just think that's instinctively how we evaluate men. So what is the answer?
What if it's how you evaluate men? What if it's you believe that that the dollar sign holds a lot of weight? And by the way, just to be clear with you, I feel the same way. But I want to play out the argument from, say, the therapist or, say, the woman who disagrees. What if the woman says, no, you don't get it. Actually, I don't care about the dollar sign. I care about something else. And I have theories on what I think the something else is, which I will share in a moment. But what would you say to that? Or do you believe that maybe they like to tell themselves that, or we like to tell ourselves we don't really care about it, but ultimately we do?
My personal experience is that when I was a professor at NYU Stern, making 160 or 180 grand a year, and my partner at the time, we had just had a kid, and she got a job making $300,000 at Goldman her first year out of business school. I didn't feel less masculine. I definitely didn't feel more masculine, but I saw us as a team. I was contributing to the relationship. I stepped up.
Stepped up with domestic work, taking care of the kids.
I did bath time. I took the kids. I don't know. I'm doing some virtue signaling here, but yeah, I did step up, or I like to think I stepped up. And it didn't make me feel less masculine because I was, in fact, still working. Now, in terms of the actual data, it's only getting worse. And that is, look at the dating apps. Men who are wealthy get so much more attention. Yeah. And if you look at, everything around, what are your minimums? The whole 6 feet, 6 figures thing. Because we live in a Hunger Games-like economy now, I just think that it's become, and I hate to say this, it's become increasingly important. And all the data, 75% of women say economic viability is key to a mate. It's 25% for men. Women say there's a lot of dissonance. I want a sensitive man. I don't think women want a sensitive man. I think they want a guy that notices their life. But I don't necessarily think they want an overly sensitive man. I don't think they find that attractive. So there's sort of how people respond in surveys and what they write editorials in the Atlantic on, and then there's actually how people actually decide who they want to sleep with. If the dude's making 80 grand and the female in the partnership's making 120, I think that marriage survives. That's okay. It's not a scorecard. But when the woman is making 120, the dude's making nothing, and he's not great at home, and he's a fucking insecure mess because he's hard on himself, that guy becomes really unattractive.
Yes.
And I don't, therapy, love yourself, maybe that'll work. Here's an idea: universal child care and $25 minimum wage, and break up big tech and companies such that there's more jobs and more opportunities for young people. The only place I go here to try and solve this problem is to hope that we evolve and that we continue to talk about emotional labor and how men can contribute on a variety of levels. But my solution is to put more money in the pockets of young people, level them up such they don't experience the economic anxiety that ends marriages. But I think the reality is it's only gotten worse in terms of society, a man's view of himself, and a woman's view of his sexual currency as being increasingly correlated, not decreasingly correlated, to how much fucking money he makes. And society in America has made it such that the difference between having money and not having money is, as I said with Katie, okay, you've worked on yourself, great. Is that going to get you health insurance for your kids? So I don't like the world we're living in. My attitude is, how do we fix it? And my viewpoint is massive programs to put more money in the pockets of all young people.
Going back to the dating app example and those studies that you mentioned, which are totally true. When you look at these dating apps, it is just tried and true. We know that women care about how much money is being made. If that is a parameter that is able to be listed, if you're making more money, you're going to get more attention and affirmation from women. I think the trouble with using these studies and looking at these dating apps as a guide is that the dating apps are so flawed and stupid to begin with. I mean, yes, maybe those guys are getting more attention, but we also know about women that many of them are just not happy with the way the dating world works. I mean, many women don't want to sleep with or engage with relationships with men at all. In fact, we're seeing many women in America saying they just want to leave America. They just want out on this whole system. I think part of the problem is when we look at those dating apps as sort of indicative of sociology and how the way humans work, it's kind of it misguides us away from the point. Yes, if we were to look within that paradigm, you want to be making more money, but perhaps the paradigm is rigged to begin with, and perhaps it's not actually a true reflection of what women want. So I just want to give you my take on this what women want question as it relates to money. I think what you say about being a provider and the idea that being a provider can manifest itself in many different ways is actually extremely important. Because I don't think it's that women want money. I think it's that women want a man who is mature and who can make them feel safe and feel a sense of security. And money turns out to be a pretty good indicator of those attributes. But
it's not exclusive.
It's not exclusive. And there could be a man who makes a lot of money and who is obsessed with it. And I think this is where women start to get anxious about your points. Someone who derives his value from how much money he has. And that's probably pretty unattractive to women because he might have the money, but he also might be quite emotionally unstable, which is actually a risk to the women, evolutionarily speaking. He might just toss her away, move on to the next woman, cheat on her, maybe he'll be an absent father, etc. I don't think that those things have any relevance in hookup culture and in dating app culture because they're not measured. But I do think in relationships, they are really important. And what women are looking for is the stability, the loyalty, the long-term support, and money can be an indicator of those things. But it all goes back to what you say, which is providing. Is this person going to provide for me? And can we find in our exploration of masculinity many different examples of ways in which men can provide that aren't necessarily he's making $200,000, $300,000 a year?
I'm with you, and I think that's right. And, demonstrating excellence in different ways, showing up, being good. I think there's a lot of people who can have happy marriages that way. And I say that, and all the data I see is that it's headed the other way. And let me just ask you, and this is anecdotal, of all your friends, right? The guy is a good guy, nice guy, fun, but is kind of struggling professionally. And then the guy who maybe is not that interesting, not that funny, not that good looking, but is just killing it professionally. Tell me about their currency in the sexual marketplace.
So I was with you on the guy who's struggling is not going to have value in the sexual marketplace. The guy who's killing it but isn't funny or interesting or magnanimous or charming, I don't think he's anywhere either.
Yeah, good for women. Maybe that's what, maybe women have decided, I got my own bank. I don't need this douchebag.
I think he could buy his way into a temporary and surface level relationship. I think the second guy can have sex. I think he could figure that out. But I don't think that ultimately when the woman sees what's really going on, which is this is someone who isn't actually self-actualized and is less stable than the money seems to suggest, I think at that point, that guy runs into trouble.
The first time I sort of connected money and sexual currency was the following. When I was in high school, nobody knew how much money anybody had. I wasn't at a disadvantage. I had a lack of self-esteem because I went to a high school back when public high schools had different people from different economic classes, University High School in the West, on the West Side. Single mother, secretary. I didn't have a lot of money. No one cared. I wasn't fun. I was insecure with bad acne and tall and skinny. Okay, that took my sexual currency down on its own. But the kids who were from rich families, they had nicer sweaters maybe, and you heard about their nice, but no one really cared. I got to college, and I was in a primarily Jewish fraternity. And these kids were all super ambitious. I think 2/3 of my pledge brothers went to law school or medical school. And I remember the Little Sister chairman. We have this ridiculous thing called Little Sisters where a bunch of women show up and become your little sister. It's basically the women who are going to hang out and like your fraternity and come to your parties and eventually maybe get boyfriends there. And I remember looking at the list from the guy who was the Little Sister chair, and we had like 4 times the number of seniors applying to be Little Sisters as freshmen. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. And he said, oh, no. He said, we Jews aren't nearly as popular with the freshmen because they're going for the whatever you term. He goes, by the time they're seniors, they start going for the doctors and lawyers. And it was like, I realized it was the first time I connected money and success to sexual currency. And my observation as I've gotten older is in the last 40 years, it's just gotten so much worse because the opportunities, the upside's so much greater if you have money and the downside's so much worse if you don't. But your observation was really an interesting one. The guys can no longer just be professionally successful and feel entitled. I think that's probably a good thing. And I think women having the confidence, some of the research shows, there's this cartoon of a woman in her 30s who never found romantic love. What a tragedy. She's in the windowsill thinking about antidepressants and feeding her 7 cats and looking out on a rainy day. Actually, the research shows she's fine. Yeah, maybe she would have liked to have had a family, but she's okay. If a dude hasn't cohabitated with a woman or been married by the time he's 30, there's a 1 in 3 chance he's going to be a substance abuser. Widows are happier after their husband dies. Widowers are less happy. It ends up that men need relationships more than women. And I think a lot of women are doing the math and going, you know what? I make a good living. I don't I find that the offering out there, I find the products being offered out there are not appealing to me. And I'm no longer economically indentured, and maybe I can have a kid on my own. Maybe I don't want to have kids. And so at the end of the day, I mean, the only thing I don't like about the incel movement, I think it's the V-cell movement. I think they're kind of voluntarily celibate because they have given up working on themselves. I was an incel until I was 19. I would have liked to have had sex much earlier than that. So I worked on myself. I worked out. I took Accutane to clear up my skin. I got a plan. I went to UCLA. I developed a kindness practice. I developed the ability to approach a woman and have her reject me and then realize I was okay the next. I started hanging around with interesting, funny people that indicated I was interesting and funny. I worked on it so I no longer would be celibate. That was tremendously motivating. But these dudes who just claim the world is against them and that no woman would want to be with them, okay, go be a fucking apprentice at a vocational job, show you work hard, hit the gym 2 or 3 times a week, be a little bit more well-read, develop a kindness practice, go to church, nonprofits, sports leagues, reading clubs, learn how to approach people, learn what works and what doesn't. You will find somebody.
I think there are probably some incels out there who would say, no, you don't understand it. I really am trying, and it's really not happening. But your point is very true that this has become such a cultural movement that there are even now economic incentives among these influencers and these incel influencers to be incels. And the perfect example is Nick Fuentes, who's like kind of the leader of this whole movement. And, he has actually there are videos of him being approached by women and people on his live streams, women on his live stream saying, I'm actually super into you. To which he'll say things like, no, I'm an incel. That's not me. I'm someone who doesn't get with women. I don't get the girls. You don't understand. And it's like, okay, this is exactly what you're describing. This is now turning into it's V-cell. You're voluntarily celibate. You're actively choosing you don't want to participate because you'd prefer to be in the comfort of the victim mindset and believe that the world is unfair and everything's stacked against you. And here's my group of incels, and we prefer just closing ourselves off from the world and complaining about things and complaining about immigrants and women and how women are stupid and all they care about is money and all of these things that feel kind of empowering in the moment. But long term, I mean, good luck to you. If that's going to be your solution, if that's the way that you think that young men should be living their lives, like, have at it. You're going to get nowhere with that philosophy. And I do want to highlight that because it's so true. What you say, there are more V-cells than the incels would like to admit.
I think it's a form of anger and mental illness. I also think there's some women who, just to be fair, blame men for everything and have decided to live alone and not even try and just demonstrate, I don't like the word misandry, but I'll use it. But I do think it's more prevalent among men. And look, I can just tell you as you get older, money is the means. The ends are relationships. And this notion that you can take pride in not connecting with people. Look, I think there's some people who decide to be celibate for whatever reason or not have a romantic relationship, or they're fine with their friends and their family. Okay, fine. But at the end of your life, the only thing that's going to provide comfort is the number of deep and meaningful relationships you have. And it just breaks my heart that these bigots, nihilists are trying to convince other young men that it's somehow okay and even aspirational to give up on relationships. No, it's not. I mean, there are a lot of people out there. The number of searches on Google for how do I make friends, places to meet people has gone up. There are people out there that want to be your friend. We live in almost a full employment economy. You can add value. You can find a job. In a capitalist society, if you have a job and you have friends, you can find a lot of meaning in providing support and concern for other people. And the last thing you want, the last feeling you'll feel will be failure if you die under bright lights surrounded by strangers. If there was anything I could communicate, if I could wrap my arms around all young men who aren't in relationships and have given up trying, the 63% of men that stop dating, the 14% of men who are the NEETs, neither in education or employment or training, if I could communicate anything to them, like if I could transmorph any belief and just say, trust me on this, it's that the anxiety and depression you're going to feel having spent a lot of your life alone and not trying to engage in relationships is going to be exponentially greater than the fear of anything that waits for you outside of that room. Get out, take risks, endure rejection, level up, work out, try to have a plan, try to be kind, try again, and, make friends, make mentors, make mates if you can.
Because you have the Lamborghini and the shiny car, it's that if you have money, it probably means that you are more self-actualized, you've figured out something that you're good at and you're monetizing it, you're more confident, you believe in yourself, you are more stable, you're more secure, you feel less anxiety, you feel less of a victim because you are less of a victim if you have money. Even for the rich kids in college, where it's like, is it the money that they're after, or is it what the money is doing to the psychology of those people and this idea that they probably are walking around with an air of greater confidence? And I feel like that's sort of the distinction that needs to be made, because if you believe that it is just the money, then the answer is just get more money. That'll solve your problem. And I want to be clear, this is what the black pill movement is about. It's no, it is simply the money. It is that the women want the money. It's that the women want to be driving around in the Lamborghini. So if you get the money and you get the Lamborghini, you've solved the problem. What I am putting forward is the idea that it's not actually just the money. It's what the money can give to you on a personal level and how it can make you feel and project more of what it means to be a man. And that's the part that I kind of want to get your views on.
So, okay, there's the money itself and the life it affords, and then there's the attributes that come along typically with someone who's able to be successful professionally. So the reason why, or what research indicates, is that women aren't actually visually drawn to a man who is in great shape. They're drawn to the attributes that reflects. This guy shows up. This guy is disciplined.
Exactly.
This guy demonstrates the attributes of who might be a good partner. Should money be a signal? Yeah. But what you said about the dude who, the money isn't just, the guy who makes a shit ton of money and has a Bugatti, but quite frankly is a low character person, you're right. My observation, and this is anecdotal because it's hard to assess statistically the character of somebody, but my sense is he can attract sexual partners, but they may not be very high character.
That's the thing. And I think this is where young men are getting misguided, is you see Andrew Tate with the Bugatti and he has like a harem of Instagram models with him. And it's like, oh, that's the solution. Like, I'm not getting laid. I can't figure out how to talk to a woman. He's got 10 of them and I see the Bugatti. So therefore, one Bugatti must equal 10 women. But they're probably being paid to be there. They're almost certainly being paid to be there. And it seems to be like just a totally misguided solution to the problem that we're not connecting with each other. Like, even if you achieve that and you take a photo of you with 10 women who, I doubt that there is any sense of actual relationship or connection between any of those women and Andrew Tate. Sure, he solved the I'm not physically in the company of women problem, but has he solved the relationship problem? Has he solved the love problem, the loneliness problem? I doubt he's solved any of those problems. And so that's why I think what we need is, and what I like about your message of providing, is solving for the other problems of actual connection with a woman, not just to have sex with a woman. You can go to Andrew Tate for those lessons, and he's wrong about many of them in my view. But the connection, and that seems to be what's actually missing for a lot of young men, and what a lot of young men actually want. It's like, it's not even about, I want to have sex. It's like, I want to have a companion in life.
I try to do an assessment of my addictions. And an addiction is something you continue to engage in despite knowing it's harming other parts of your life, and yet you continue to engage in it. I'm addicted to the affirmation of strangers. I continue to work harder than I should. I continue to take other people's opinion more seriously than I should. I'm desperate for affirmation, despite the fact I'm going to be dead soon, and it really doesn't fucking matter what strangers think of me. And occasionally, my obsession with what strangers think of me takes me out of my head, and I'm not as present with the people who do, in fact, love me, and I do, in fact, love a great deal. That's an addiction. And it's pathetic at my age to still be that way. And now some of those embers probably make me more successful, but at this point, why do I need... anyways, that's an addiction. My other addiction is money. I'm traumatized by it. It solved a lot of problems for me. I was able to take care of my mother. I was able to do things I'd always wanted to do, feel better about myself. I have more money than I'm ever going to be able to spend, but I still just accepted a speaking gig for $250,000 in Jackson Hole because it's $250,000. And then I think, oh God, I gotta get on a... It's not, by the way, there's no direct flights from London to Jackson Hole, Ed. I didn't know if you knew that. So I'm basically going to be out of my home for 3 days. And when I get back at my age, I'm going to be a fucking chocolate mess for 2 days. So it's like everyone loses dad and their partner for a week. For me to get $250,000, I will lose $500,000 or $1 million in the market up or down today. Why am I doing this? And it's because I had so little money when I was growing up. I can't resist it. And then I start making rationalizations. Well, I'll give it away. I don't need it, but I'll give it away. Think about how much good and yet I continue to damage my health. I continue to not damage my relationships, but not invest. I got one more Thanksgiving with my oldest son, and he's gone. He's in college. 90% of the time you spend with your kids is up until the age of 18. Why the fuck am I going to Jackson Hole? Why? Right? And it's because I've been for so long trained to believe that economic security was absolutely everything. And I can't get off that hamster wheel. But I do think that at some point with money and partnership, the most rewarding thing in my life has been not having the money. As I thought about it, well, having the money is pretty cool. But a close second, and maybe even first, is I made it with a partner. The funnest thing about money is the making it, not even having it, I don't think. I mean, it's great to have it, but if you can find a high character partner and you demonstrate character and you build something together, that is disco. Because I think if you have a lot of money, I think sometimes if you're not a high character person, as you said, the people you're going to attract aren't necessarily what I'd call high value people.
They may not even like you, yeah.
But the real high character, high value women, they get Ed Olson. They get a nice, attractive, balanced guy who's a fucking baller professionally and is going to be able to provide. They get to have it all. So everybody in this mating race wants to have a really high character, high value partner. And one of the boxes you need to check if you want that person, I would argue, or a greater selection or opportunity of those people includes real economic trajectory.
Well, that's very nice of you to say about me. Thank you. It seems as though the money thing is one game in life. It's like there are many different games that you can play in life. And it's almost like when you're describing checking the boxes, money is just a giant one. It's a giant, you want to show, if you want to be a man, if you want to be sort of like what it means to be a man, if you want to embrace a sense of masculinity, it's like you need to demonstrate that you can play that game and you can win that game to a certain degree. But it's almost like there are all of these other games that you need to be able to demonstrate that you can win. You need to be able to demonstrate that you can be dependable emotionally, that you can be kind, that you can sort of handle a lot of pressure and you don't crack. Like there are all of these different metrics, I feel like, for what it means to be a man. I so agree with your point that it's like we've become so obsessed with money as a society that it's almost taken up all of the space in the room to the point where we can't even keep our eye on the ball and all of the other things that are important and substantive in what it means to be a man. And what I would hate to see is this idea that, like, because you're emphasizing that money does play a role, your message is being interpreted by other people, by your critics who are not reading the book and saying, that's all that matters. But you've just said it right there. It's like you care deeply about money and you have an addiction to money, and yet it isn't everything. And it's not even what made you and what make you an aspirational figure, both to your wife and to your fans and your listeners, because it wasn't about having the money. It was about all of the things. It was about making the money. It was about sharing the money. It was about building that economic security with someone, laying out a plan, having a trajectory, all of those other things that actually weirdly aren't even about the money. And I feel like that's the thing that maybe your critics, I would hope they understood that more about you.
Yeah, but you got to keep in mind, if you don't have critics, you're not saying anything, or at least that's what I try to tell myself as I cry into my pillow. But I'll give you an example, Ed. I have traveled 180 days a year for 30 years, and it's usually on someone else's dime, so I stay at beautiful places. And inevitably, I'll be at the George Cinq in Paris, or I'll be at I don't know, whatever it is, the Amen in Tokyo. And inevitably, if I'm alone, I get upgraded to some ridiculously fat fucking suite. Inevitably. And you know what? How much value registers when you're alone in that fat fucking suite? I'm not exaggerating. I've gotten upgraded, and I call and I say, how much does this room cost? And they're like, oh, that room's this suite. We would charge 12 or 15 grand a night. It's worth $300 to me because that's what I can get a bed for. If I'm not there with someone, it's meaningless.
Yes.
It's meaningless. It's like, it doesn't register. If I can't share it with somebody, it has no value. I mean, literally, it's like, it didn't happen. Who cares? And it's not only like, okay, I could be dating a model and she would be really into it and, be impressed by me. What you want is, I mean, the real goal is, even if it's like a decent hotel at Disneyland with your kids, you can like go to sleep with someone and you built it together. And it's like you get to do these great things because you have this great partnership and you get to share it. And I think getting to stay at some tacky hotel in Disney World that you saved up all year on, but that the kids are next door and you're with someone you enjoy, fuck, that is so much more rewarding than being alone in a $12,000 suite at the Amen. What I worry about is that there's so much wrapped up into self-esteem, the way society evaluates you, that as a young man, if you don't at least develop a plan for economic security, just a plan. You don't have to show up with the Range Rover, the Panerai, but I'm going to vocational school. I'm getting my GED and I'm going to vocational school and I'm going to be a plumber's apprentice, or I'm working for a company that installs, cabinetry, and this is my plan. And you demonstrate discipline. No, I got to go home. I got to get up early. I work hard. I think that's a pretty decent path. And I worry that big tech seducing men offline or seducing them to go online, that they're not developing confidence, they're not working out, they're not around people to develop social skills, that they're just literally like shutting off all the arteries to relationships. And they're going to wake up, and even if they get to money, even if they figure out that, oh, maybe I'm wrong, maybe Andrew Tate's crypto trading platform they can make millions on, and they wake up with $1 million, they're out of shape, they're anxious, they see women is just like, what they envision a woman is based on the porn they've consumed, and they really never have a true partner. What I would offer up, unfortunately, is in order to get to that good partnership, it's going to be really difficult if you don't demonstrate as a man economic viability or the potential to be economically viable. It's unfair. It shouldn't be as big as important as it is, but it is.
But maybe also it isn't unfair. Maybe it's unfair in terms of how difficult it is to make money today. That's part of the unfairness of the system that we're living in 2025. But I actually don't find it unfair that the man needs to demonstrate an ability to present some economic viability and ability to provide. I think that that's actually kind of great, because it also inspires you as a man to get your shit together and to work really hard. And that's the piece of it that I'm like, that this might actually be a good thing. And you referenced the idea that the guy who's enrolling in vocational training, he's coming up with a plan, he's figuring out how he's going to make some money and figuring out his savings plan. I think that guy, I would bet, maybe I'm wrong, but I would bet that guy is more attractive to most women, at least a lot of women, than the guy who made $1 million on crypto because he got lucky and, rents Lamborghinis in his spare time. I would argue that a woman would be more attracted to the guy who demonstrated the